Mom looked at me and said, "You're here out of pity, don't linger." I just sipped my wine and left calmly. 2 weeks later they discovered the mountain cabin, their family tradition, had been sold. Then came the bank alerts, accounts frozen, utilities overdue, and what I did next made them scream. At some point my parents got too comfortable, too arrogant. They forgot who kept the lights on when Dad's pension didn't show up for 6 months, who covered the property taxes when Mom conveniently ignored the envelope with the red stamp, who picked up the pieces every time one of their proud, impulsive decisions backfired. They stopped saying thank you. Then they stopped pretending to care. By the time I turned 34, I was a full-time lawyer and a part-time scapegoat. Every time something went wrong it was my fault. Every time something went right it was because they raised me the hard way. Meanwhile I was the one wiring money under different names so they wouldn't feel embarrassed. I was the one taking unpaid time off to fix the plumbing in their so-called vacation cabin, which I also paid to renovate. They told their friends I was doing okay for herself, while cashing checks with my name in the memo line. Then came the dinner. A Sunday of course because Mom insisted family dinners were non-negotiable, even though she rarely cooked anymore. It was store-bought roast beef, boxed mashed potatoes, and a weird orange salad that nobody touched. I brought wine. Always did. Habit I guess. Emily was there too, sipping cider like her life hadn't completely derailed after her boyfriend moved to Montana with their dog and the car she'd co-signed for. They talked about the weather, about politics, about how kids today just don't understand responsibility. I nodded, smiled, waited. Then out of nowhere Mom put her fork down and said it. "You're here out of pity, don't linger." I didn't say anything. Just looked at her, then at Dad, who didn't even flinch. He kept chewing like she hadn't just slapped me across the face without moving a muscle. I finished my wine. Stood up. Left the glass on the table. No dramatic exit, no tears. Just walked out and didn't look back. They didn't call. But 2 weeks later the cabin was gone. They didn't even know I owned it. Years back I'd had Dad sign a property transfer when he was panicking about tax issues. I told him I'd protect it just in case. He nodded and signed. Never asked again. So I sold it. Quietly. Cleanly. Wiggly. They found out when they called to make their annual fall reservation and the woman on the line said the new owner had declined it. Mom thought it was a mistake. Dad called the sheriff. They thought someone had stolen it. They were half right. Then the bank alerts started. The joint account they used to pay their bills had been flagged. Frozen for suspicious activity. That activity was me pulling my name off as co-signer. Legally I had every right. But it caused just enough chaos to freeze their auto payments. Lights shut off. Water bills overdue. Suddenly the garbage company wanted a deposit. They tried calling. I let it ring. Emily sent a text. "What are you doing?" I replied with a screenshot of every major expense I'd paid for over the last decade. Her name was on 5 of them. She didn't answer after that. A week passed before Dad left a voicemail saying he was concerned. Another week and Mom sent an email asking if I could please clear this up. I marked it unread and archived it. Because what they didn't realize was that they'd handed me every key, passwords, documents, power of attorney, all because I was the reliable one. The lawyer. The daughter who never said no. Now they were finding out what happens when I stop saying yes. And I still hadn't touched the house. The one I saved from foreclosure in 2018 by buying it outright under my name. The one they were still living in. They thought the worst had happened. They were wrong. This wasn't revenge. This was the warning shot. They called every day for a week. I didn't block them. Blocking would have made it clean. I didn't want clean. I wanted them to sit with it. I wanted their own words echoing back at them while the dial tone rang. Let them call and wonder. Let them pace the living room I technically owned, trying to figure out when things had shifted. They'd been so sure I'd always come when called. Then one Thursday morning it happened. They came home from the grocery store, arms full of plastic bags and discounted rotisserie chicken, and the front door wouldn't open. Dad tried the key twice before assuming it was the lock freezing up again. Then he tried the code. Same code he'd had for years. My birthday. Didn't work. He tried the backup one. Nothing. He called the locksmith and that's how he found out. The locks hadn't failed. They'd been changed. By the owner. I didn't answer his voicemail. I just sat at my desk sipping coffee and listened to the message twice. He didn't yell. Not yet. Just sounded tired. Confused. That made it better. When Mom realized she couldn't log into her health insurance account, she called the provider. They told her the primary email had been updated to mine. Years ago when she was recovering from surgery and didn't want to deal with all that website stuff, she handed over her passwords. I handled it. Always did. She didn't get her prescription that week. Neither did Dad. Their refill cards had expired and the autopay feature was tied to the frozen account. They didn't know what was still in my name and what wasn't. That was the beauty of it. I'd woven myself so deeply into their lives, they couldn't tell what belonged to them anymore. And they had no way of asking without admitting they didn't know how to function without me. Emily showed up 3 days later. At my office. Hair in a messy bun, holding a Tupperware of lemon bars and this ridiculous strange smile like we were two sisters having a misunderstanding. I watched her through the glass and didn't move. Security offered to escort her out. I just said no, let her sit. She sat for 40 minutes. Then she left the lemon bars on the reception counter. I tossed them in the trash. I don't even like lemon. After that, the texts got more frantic. Mom emailed 3 times in one day, subject lines all in caps, "Please Barbara. We need to talk. Your father isn't well." I archived them. Then I turned off email notifications altogether. They started trying to access the alarm system. I'd upgraded it after I took over the mortgage, quietly installing a new digital platform that ran through my app. Now every time they tried to override it, the system locked them out for 5 minutes, then reset. Sometimes it locked them out completely for hours. They'd have to wait in the car eating drive-through sandwiches, watching their own porch lights flicker on at random intervals. I knew what I was doing. This wasn't some emotional spiral. I had case files piled higher than my personal drama. This was methodical. Because what they didn't understand, what they never seemed to understand, was that I wasn't the weak one. I wasn't the leftover kid they could guilt into sticking around. I was the one who held the paper trail. The one who remembered the late nights on the phone with creditors, the emergency wire transfers, the hospital invoices that they forgot to reimburse. I was the one who got things done. And still I hadn't touched the house. That was the last piece. Not just physically but symbolically. It was the place they retreated to, the fortress they claimed was proof we stuck together. But I knew what was underneath that roof. The years of cold shoulders, the snide remarks, the subtle insults disguised as parenting. Let them live in it a little longer. Let them guess when the hammer would fall. Because the best part of control isn't using it all at once. It's knowing you could and choosing not to. Not yet. The house was the last piece. I could have taken it from them a year ago, maybe 2, and they wouldn't have noticed. But I waited. I wanted them to feel the difference between being untouchable and being forgotten. They still saw themselves as the center of something. Some grand family legacy built on pride and roast beef Sundays. They never saw what I was doing as anything more than a phase. In their eyes, I was just being dramatic, emotional, too sensitive. Dad even told Emily that he was giving me space, as if I were a sulking teenager and not the reason they still had a roof over their heads. What they didn't realize was that the papers had been signed months ago. All it took was a quiet motion through my firm, pushed through by a friend in the real estate division. I'd legally transferred the deed to a holding company I controlled. One that had my initials in reverse and a P.O. box 2 towns over. No red flags. No warning. They never checked. Why would they? They trusted me. Until they didn't. I waited until I saw the bank account finally hit 0. Not frozen, just empty. They'd burned through the leftovers faster than I thought. I guess they assumed someone would step in. Maybe Emily. Maybe even me. Then on a dull Tuesday morning I clicked submit. The final form confirming the transfer of the house. It took seconds. No fireworks, no drama. Just a notification and a small line of text. Property deed finalized and recorded. And just like that, it wasn't theirs anymore. An hour later I got the first call. Not from them, from their lawyer. A man who hadn't spoken to me in nearly 8 years. He said my parents had been under the impression that their home was still safe. I told him that impression was incorrect. He asked if I was open to a conversation. I said I was always open to legal dialogue, just not family therapy disguised as paperwork. That night I disabled the utilities. Everything. Water, gas, electricity. I didn't do it suddenly. I scheduled it for 11:59 p.m. on Friday. Gave them time to feel it coming. I wanted them to sit in the dark, together, and feel the cold creep in. Friday came and the outage hit right on time. No lights. No heat. The cameras showed them stumbling through the house, lighting candles, dragging blankets into the living room. They still didn't leave. Not right away. Pride is funny like that. But pride doesn't heat the water. And it doesn't pay overdue property taxes either. They called Emily. I know because she left me a voicemail that sounded more like a threat than a plea. She said she didn't understand what I was trying to prove. I didn't bother replying. She could have asked that question 5 years ago, when I lent her 15 grand to cover a boyfriend's failed business and never saw a dime. Saturday the doorbell rang. I wasn't surprised to see them. No yelling. No demands. Just 2 old people standing in front of me with water-streaked jackets and an envelope. Dad looked down. Mom didn't say anything. Inside the envelope were letters. Written by hand. Long ones. They apologized. Not fake apologies. Real ones. They admitted things I didn't think they were capable of admitting. That they ignored me. That they used me. That they took my career for granted, mocked me behind my back, and convinced themselves they deserved more than they earned. They asked for a second chance. They offered to sign over power of attorney again. This time officially. No tricks. No conditions. It should have meant something. It didn't. Pegged them. Quietly. Then I closed the door. Didn't slam it. Didn't lock it. I just didn't open it again. Because when someone finally admits the truth, it's not always an invitation to rebuild. Sometimes it's just proof that they knew all along. And they did it anyway. Apologies come late. Boys. People wait until everything is collapsing around them before they decide to be human. That envelope with their handwritten letters might have hit hard a year ago. Even 6 months ago I would have read them twice, maybe cried, probably softened. But now they were just ink on paper. The next morning I sat at my desk with the envelope open beside me. Their words still smelled like damp fabric in desperation. I didn't touch them again. Instead I opened my laptop, signed into my client portal, and clicked into the folder marked Real Estate Disposition. Inside was a confirmation. Residential auction scheduled. November 3rd. Final posting date passed. The house was already listed. The photos were up, even ones I'd never seen. The cracked tile by the back door, the peeling wallpaper in the laundry room. Honest photos. No illusions. Starting bid was $178,000. I had full authority to cancel it. I didn't. Instead I went to the post office and dropped off a copy of the auction notice. Certified mail. Delivery required a signature. I made sure of it. That same afternoon, Emily sent me a text. Mom hasn't stopped crying. Dad hasn't left the den. Just tell me what you want. I stared at it, deleted it, then poured myself a drink and sat on the floor, remembering the night I'd slept in that same den when I was 20, home from college after a bad breakup. They told me not to talk about it. Told me it would make the family look weak. Now they were the ones collapsing in that same room. It was around midnight when the flash drive caught up to me. I hadn't opened it at first. I thought it was some empty gesture from Emily, another way to slow me down. But that night I gave in. Inside were folders. Labeled with years. 2002, 2005, 2008. Photos I never knew existed. One was from my first debate tournament. Another from when I fell asleep in the back seat with my suit still on after a long case competition. There was even a video of me practicing opening statements in front of the bathroom mirror when I was 17. The file was grainy. You could hear Mom laughing softly behind the camera. I didn't know how to feel. And that scared me. The next day I got an email from the county. A request had been filed to place a temporary injunction on the sale, an attempt to buy time. But the judge had denied it. I read the line twice. Denied due to insufficient cause and lack of standing. Deed is lawfully transferred. They were out of time. Then out of nowhere came the part one never saw coming. A reporter called my office. Not a major outlet. Some local paper that covered neighborhood zoning changes and old church fairs. He said someone tipped them off about a daughter evicting her own parents. He asked if I'd comment. I told him no. He asked again, said it would be anonymous. I still said no. But that's when I realized. Someone had started talking. Maybe Emily. Maybe one of Mom's bridge friends. I didn't care. Let them talk. Let them whisper over coffee and church steps about the daughter who pulled the rug out from under her own blood. They didn't see the years leading up to it. They weren't there for the quiet digs, the manipulation, the obligation dressed up as love. And then came another twist. Emily sent me another email. This one with scanned documents. They drafted a new will. Left everything, to me. The remaining savings, the life insurance, even the ridiculous coin collection Dad once swore was a backup fortune. No guilt. No conditions. Just surrender. They were giving up. And for a minute I almost felt sorry for them. But I didn't stop the auction. Instead I asked the agent to move it up 3 days. Just to make sure they didn't find another way to stall. The morning of the sale I got one last message. From Mom. Not begging. Not angry. Just 5 words. Please don't forget we tried. I didn't reply. Because trying after the damage is done isn't effort. It's survival. And I was done saving anyone but myself. The auction lasted 17 minutes. That's how long it took to wipe out everything they'd clung to. The kitchen wallpaper Mom never let anyone touch. The dining room where Dad carved the turkey every year with a performance like he was being filmed. The creaky stairs I used to climb after high school debates. Exhausted but hopeful they'd ask how it went. Gone in 17 minutes. The winning bid was $231,500. A young couple from Colorado bought it. Newly married. No kids yet. They said they wanted to open up the floor plan and make the space feel fresh. I gave them my full blessing. The house deserved a different story. I didn't go to the auction in person. I watched it online, standing in my kitchen barefoot with coffee gone cold on the counter. When the final bid came in, I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just stared at the screen until it went blank. Then I turned my phone back on. 7 missed calls. 3 from Emily. 4 from a number I didn't recognize, probably a lawyer or a desperate last-ditch attempt from one of their friends. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I already knew what they said. The moving truck showed up that afternoon. Right on time. I made sure of it. The new owners had requested possession within 48 hours. I gave them 36. I wasn't trying to be cruel anymore, just efficient. They'd spent a decade making me feel like a footnote in their lives. Now they were the ones boxed up and waiting for someone else to turn the page. Emily called again. This time I picked up. She said Mom refused to leave the upstairs bedroom. That Dad was sitting outside on the curb holding a snow shovel, even though it hadn't snowed in weeks. She said they were quiet. Not angry. Just stunned. I didn't say anything. After a moment she asked me the one thing I wasn't ready for. Are you okay? I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was the first time anyone in my family had asked me that without expecting something in return. I hung up. Not out of spite. I just didn't have an answer. That night I wandered into a bar I hadn't stepped foot in since law school. It looked smaller than I remembered. I sat in the back at the same table I used to study at, ordered a drink I no longer liked, and watched strangers talk about nothing important. It should have felt nostalgic. It didn't. It felt like watching someone else's life. The next day an envelope showed up at my office. No return address. Just my name on the front, written in my father's handwriting, the kind I used to try and copy when forging his signature on school forms. Inside were 3 things. First, photographs. One of Dad sitting in the empty living room on a cardboard box, holding an unplugged lamp. One of Mom folding her wedding dress into a clear storage bin. One of the house taken from the sidewalk. The front door wide open. The windows dark. $27,340.61. The remaining balance from their savings account. Everything they had left. No note. No explanation. Just the money. I didn't cash it. I didn't rip it up either. I slid it into a drawer under my desk and closed it. Then came something I never expected. An invitation. Not formal. Not even written on a card. Just a torn piece of notebook paper. Scribbled in my mother's handwriting. Dinner. 7 p.m. Bring wine if you want. You're always welcome. No, please. No guilt trip. No manipulative phrases. Just an address. A 1-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. They didn't ask me to forgive them. They didn't beg. They just opened a door and waited. I didn't go. But I didn't throw it away either. I sat with it. Stared at it longer than I should have. Wondered what kind of people move from a 4-bedroom house into a place small enough that the dining table touches the couch. Wondered if they cried while they packed. And somewhere in the middle of all that wondering, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to admit. I didn't hate them anymore. But I didn't want them back either. Because this version of me, the one who doesn't flinch at power, who sleeps through silence, who doesn't need approval or permission, she didn't exist when I was living under their roof. They'd had their chance. They used it up. And now, finally, so had I. I never went to dinner. I told myself maybe I'd go the next day. Or the day after. I rehearsed what I'd say in the car sometimes, parked outside my building at night, hands still on the steering wheel. Just for the sake of knowing I could. But the truth was, the more days passed, the easier it got not to go. They didn't follow up. No second invitation. No guilt-ridden messages. They just stopped. That was the unexpected part. I thought they'd keep pushing. Keep clinging. But they didn't. They let go. And in a way that felt more jarring than all the shouting, all the desperate calls, all the panic. Because silence, real silence, means the fight is over. Not lost. Not won. Just done. The silence was clean. Clinical. It crept into everything. Mornings with untouched coffee, evenings where I realized I hadn't spoken to anyone outside of work in days. No more bridge group gossip texts from Mom. No more half-hearted holiday plan reminders. No more voicemails from Dad asking if I'd take a quick look at a document he couldn't understand. Gone. One afternoon, weeks later, a woman from a legal aid clinic called. Said her name was Cheryl. Friendly. Professional. She said she'd met my mother recently. Apparently, Mom had come in asking about setting up a simple will and final affairs. Nothing complicated. No trust funds. No clauses. Just clarity. Cheryl said Mom mentioned me not to complain. Just casually. Said something like, if Barbara ever wants to be involved again, I want to make sure things are simple. That one sentence stuck with me more than anything. Because it wasn't an invitation. It wasn't an apology. It was preparation for a life that didn't include me. And for once it didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like acceptance. I didn't know what to do with that. That weekend I went through some old boxes in my closet. Stuff I hadn't touched in years. Childhood things, photos, letters from college. I found a folder with utility bills in my name from their house. The ones I used to pay automatically without thinking. I shredded every single one. And then I opened the desk drawer where I'd kept the check. The $27,340.61 they'd left me like some kind of symbolic penance. I took it out. It had started to curl at the edges. I didn't cash it. But I didn't destroy it either. I slid it into a safety deposit box and locked it away. Not because I needed it. Just because I wanted it out of sight. Out of reach. Like them. About a month later I saw Emily again. This time walking out of a bank. She looked thinner. Maybe more tired. Her hair was shorter. She didn't see me and I didn't call out. We were two people in the same city who had nothing to say. A week later I got one final email from her. Subject line, they're gone. No body. No explanation. Just that. I knew what it meant. They'd moved. Probably out of state. Quietly. No fanfare. No drama. Just gone. A day after that I got a final forwarded envelope at my office. Inside was a short typed note. Barbara, will always be reachable. But you don't owe us anything. Love, Mom and Dad. That was it. Not handwritten. Not emotional. Just a clean sentence that didn't ask for anything in return. They meant it. I didn't reply. Because there was nothing left to say. No explosion. No reconciliation. Just the last breath of something that had been choking me for years finally exhaled. It's been months now. The silence stayed. My life is quieter. No more updates from people I used to bend backward for. No more shifting my calendar for phone calls I didn't want to take. I've taken vacations. Alone. I moved again, this time to a place that feels mine. Some days I think about them. Not with anger. Not even with sadness. Just with distance. The kind of space that takes a long time to earn. I used to think I'd need closure. That one big final moment. Now I realize it doesn't come for everyone. Sometimes it's not about slamming the door. It's about leaving it open and just never walking through it again. Sometimes I wonder if they still set a place for me at dinner out of habit. If Mom still makes too much and Dad still pours a second glass of wine like someone might show up. Maybe they do. Maybe they've stopped. But I don't think I'll ever find out. Because I'm not curious anymore. And that, more than anything, tells me I finally let go.